Hello, viewers of the internet. I am Mike Wilson of the Knoxville News Sentinel, joined here by Blake Toppmeyer, also of the News Sentinel. We are at Neyland Stadium, where Tennessee was shellacked by Alabama 48-17 today. Three straight losses for the Vols, all by at least 23 points. Blake, interesting comment from Jeremy Pruitt after the game, and I think that's where we should start this talk. Jeremy Pruitt said he feels that Tennessee is closing the gap with Alabama. He said based on what he saw from Alabama's sideline 3 years ago before he was at Tennessee to now that gap is closed. Is that a view you share? And what did you make of that comment from Jeremy Pruitt?
Well, evidently Jeremy Pruitt was watching a different game than what I was tonight, because this didn't look like two programs that were getting closer to each other. I mean, at some point you got to believe what the scoreboard says it is, and it's 48-17. That's a 31-point differential. That's not a gap that's closing. When you look back at the final year of the Butch Jones era, the result was 45-7. So I guess technically the gap did close by one touchdown, but not much. I mean, look, Alabama was what we thought they were going to be offensively. Tennessee was no match to stop them, didn't tackle very well. Secondary showed a lot of holes, very limited pass rush. Offensively, I thought the Vols did, a few nice things, but yeah, overall, I mean, I guess I'm not really sure what Pruitt was going to say otherwise. He's not going to say that the gap isn't closing in his third season, but the bottom line is, Tennessee is now 0-8 against its top three rivals during the Pruitt era of Alabama, Georgia, Florida. But it's not so much just that they're 0-8 against those teams. It's that all 8 of those losses have come by at least 3 touchdowns. I mean, I think the case could be made that Tennessee has shown regression this year. Certainly it did against Alabama. Tennessee was competitive later into the game last season than they were this year. And this game was pretty much over right after that fumble return for a touchdown, 3 plays into the second half.
And obviously Florida is the only remaining rival on the schedule this year. It's the final game of the year. And I mean, for all signs, we're seeing that's going to be an 0-9 record by the end of the season between Tennessee and its top 3 rivals. There were some bright spots today, and I think that's worth noting. Obviously, the fan base was not thrilled to see Jarrett Guarantano be the starting quarterback, as there's a very strong love-hate, mostly hate relationship with Guarantano. He played well, and not the big passing numbers, not the highest completion percentage, but threw some really good passes, seemed to go through his progressions better than he has in some games. What do we make of Jarrett's performance today, and should he have been given more opportunity to throw the ball as well?
I thought it was a gritty effort, and now 4 games against Alabama in his career. This was by far his best game he's played against the Tide. Completed more than 50% of his passes, no turnovers, 2 touchdown passes, threw the deep ball pretty well. Wasn't huge numbers, but I also think, sort of to your point there, probably should have gotten more opportunity to throw downfield. I mean, there were times where Alabama was really loading the box. It took Tennessee a while to really dial up some deep shots. And then there were other times where they just remained curiously conservative. There was one sequence in the third quarter in particular. Tennessee recovers a fumble at the Alabama 48-yard line. They hand it off on the first play for a loss of 1. They gain 4 yards on a jet sweep. And then on 3rd and 7, they run it again, loss of 1. Fans booed, probably appropriately so, and Tennessee punted. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of rhythm in the play calling. And I know when things are going bad, criticizing the quarterbacks and the play calling are the 2 easiest moves. You can't really criticize the quarterbacks after tonight, so you criticize the play calling. But, I mean, there were a lot of moments tonight where I thought there were some head scratchers. And then you just go back to Jeremy Pruitt's comment after the Missouri game about how this is a team that's not going to play in fear. It's going to be a team that's not going to coach in fear. Well, I mean, I think perhaps he misspoke, because that's not what we saw tonight. 4th and 2 from Alabama's 15-yard line. Tennessee trots out the field goal unit. They get the ball late in the first half, chance to maybe take some shots. They took 1 shot, and then on 3rd down, they handed it off and punted it back to Alabama. Pretty conservative there. And then, I mentioned after the turnover there, very conservative approach leading into the punt. And so, yeah, I mean, it seems like it's play calling without much rhythm, and tonight seemed to be fairly conservative.
Yeah, I think we can look at this and say this wasn't really the offense's game that lost it. Much more defensive issues. We haven't seen a lot of turnovers through 5 games now. The secondary has 1 interception. As a team, I think there's only 2. Just not a lot of production in that area. Obviously, one turnover today, as you mentioned, but bad tackling. I mean, Henry To'oTo'o missing an open field tackle on Mac Jones. Just a lot of defensive issues. How does this team address those things with a bye week before going into Arkansas?
I think they got to find a way to get some more intensity out of the unit. I mean, when we think back to last season, that 6-game winning streak, and there were multiple factors that went into that, but the biggest factor was how well that defense was playing. The leaders from that unit are gone now. I think some leadership needs to emerge on that side of the ball. You need to see more intensity. I mean, the defensive line still really isn't very disruptive. Jeremy Pruitt fired his defensive line coach on Sunday. Short term, we didn't see any great results from that. We'll see what that can do long term. Still not getting much pass rush. Of course, anytime Tennessee has blitzed in the first 5 games, it seems like, well, then their secondary gets picked on. They don't get to the quarterback in time, and they find holes in the secondary. So it's kind of like they can't win going either way. If they don't blitz, then the quarterback has all day to find an open target. If they do blitz, then they get exploited in the openings in the secondary. This secondary was supposed to be, the real solid unit on this defense with so many starters back, experienced cornerbacks, and it just hasn't been that. And it is so hard to judge after a game against Alabama, the best offense in the country. I think they proved that. There's no question. Even losing Jalen Waddle on the opening kickoff, this Alabama offense was still dynamite. But the tackling was poor. I mean, you mentioned, one play in particular, Darrell Middleton breaks through the line on 3rd and 2, has Najee Harris in his sights. Harris spins away, gets past Henry To'oTo'o. Just probably the worst tackling we've seen from Tennessee all season. And I think if Tennessee is going to jumpstart this season, it has to start with defense. I think this offense, given what we know about Tennessee's quarterback room, it has a ceiling, and it's not a very high ceiling in my opinion. But defensively, I feel like this is a group that there still is a much higher level that it can reach.
Yeah, certainly a lot was expected of all of those groups. A lot of returners up front, a lot of returners in the secondary, and a guy like Henry To'oTo'o in the middle. Stay tuned to Go Vols Extra and KnoxNews.com for all the coverage of Tennessee's loss to Alabama, heading into the bye week, Arkansas, and beyond through the rest of the season.